here in Southern California, and I'm here to talk to you about, this is no surprise, my favorite topic, Thor, and in particular to help you take advantage of Thor tools in your IDE. For starters, I get to talk to you a little bit about myself. And as I do so, I ask for your indulgence for spending considerably more time than usual on my About Me slide, as there is a deeply personal reason for doing so, which also provides some context to my presentation. I've been a dev for over 50 years. Actually, for the majority of that time, I was a programmer until I was informed that that term had become a pejorative, and then I became a dev instead. During my career, I've only used 2 languages, as you can see. Also note that I'm one of the few here where less than half of my career has been in Fox. There are a number of similarities between these 2 halves of my career. For instance, for most of my time in each of these 2 languages, they were, how can I say this gently, long past their prime. Beyond that, for the last 20 years in APL, I worked for a single company. And when that job, different company, landed in my lap, I'm still working for that same company. The home office for both of these jobs, a plane flight away. I've been working remotely for over 40 years. That also means that I've not had to look for work or do a job interview since 1982. Initially, my growth in Fox was very slow, limited mainly to a few books, the Universal Thread, and the annual Southwest Fox conferences. And that is how, in 2008, I ended up at a session at Southwest Fox in which Rick and Doug and Craig Boyd were promoting VFPX, encouraging all of us to contribute in our own way to VFPX. Standing in the back of the room and in a way completely unlike the usual me, I interrupted and said something like this: "Are you guys crazy? None of us here," as if I was speaking for everybody, "none of us here are capable of doing this. You're the guys whose names are on all the books I've been reading. You've been giving sessions forever. Why in the world do you think that we could actually contribute anything?" Doug and Rick, I apologize now, a little late, but you should know that only 3 days later, the universe decided to have the last laugh on me. I got an email from some random guy responding to a post of mine on the UT. He had been at the conference as well, even though we never met. Meeting him really changed things dramatically, both professionally and personally. Here's the email. First of all, note the date. 15 years ago today, it was the day after the end of the Southwest Fox, 2008. And this was my introduction to Matt Slay, who happens to be president of a machine company in Birmingham, Alabama. And it turns out his side gig was that he liked learning about programming languages. We really hit it off together right from the start. By the end of that year, so just over 2 months, we had over 800 emails between us, and soon thereafter, we released PEM Editor, and over time, a lot of other tools. We had a lot of fun developing new tools for us and other developers as well to make their life easier. We were a team, we were collaborators, each with our own contributions. Essentially, he was the big idea man, the guy who brought in new thoughts, mostly from outside of the Fox world, and I was the one who implemented them. This was a relationship that lasted for 13 years. I talked to him regularly throughout the years, most of the time on his way to and from work. Sadly enough, as most of you know, he passed away 2 years ago this month. A great loss for the community and also for me personally. I truly miss him, his humor, and yes, his voice. And in a way, what you're going to see here is a tribute to him, because just about everything you might associate with my name, you have to understand that he was part of as well. I see his imprint everywhere in this session. But before digging into the meat of this session, I'd like to give you further insight as to my prolonged interest in Thor and Friends, by, of all things, introducing you to my sister Mary and her second husband Dan. As you can see, they have a train set in front of them. When I met Dan, we went down to his basement and he showed me this huge layout of model trains with buildings and bridges and who knows what else sprawling over his entire basement. My sister said that this had been his hobby for 10 years. Actually, she said it was his passion. He had spent thousands of hours on it, as well as many thousands of dollars. For me, for the last 15 years, since I met Matt via email, PEM Editor and Thor and Friends have been not merely my hobby, not even really my passion, they've been my obsession. So I haven't been working on them, I've been having fun playing with them. I have fun creating tools which we can use to make our time working in the IDE easier. My tools take your code as data. My tinkering around has saved me an unbelievable amount of time in my normal day-to-day work, as it did for Matt, as I hope it does for you. But honestly, the fun is in the tinkering, just as Dan's fun was with his trains. So, more about me. Not much to say. I've given some presentations. I have been project manager for a whole bunch of VFPX projects. I've contributed to others and have given some awards, been given some awards. So let's talk about the agenda here. First of all, why yet another Thor session? And then a different approach to Thor, something called the quick access menu, which I will install and encourage you to install as well. Then I will show you a hidden context menu, which is accessed in an unusual way, which gives you access to documentation, gives you direct access to the GitHub page for suggestions and such. And then finally, we'll go through, hopefully, about 6 dozen Thor tools. So the agenda, we have 2 days. And what are we going to do in 2 days? First, we're going to do the big guns. And the big guns are the tools that really, they're the most sophisticated, require the most understanding, and give you the biggest bang for your buck. That's today. Tomorrow, we'll do the pop guns, the little tools, a whole slew of little tools that do all sorts of small things that can make your life easier. Some of them are close to being big guns. It's not a clear differentiation between the 2 days. And while I think of it, look, we're going to save a question and answer session each day to the end of the session, not during the middle of the session. So why yet another Thor session? Well, I asked myself that question because I thought that everything that could be said about Thor had already been said. Enough presentations here at Southwest Fox, enough Thor news and articles, enough is enough. I thought that users of Thor tools had pretty much found what they could use and weren't likely to change much from yet another session. What new could be said? But this changed for me when I hired a new guy, Steve, who's attending as well, who was supposed to take over for me if, God forbid, I were to finally retire. He started asking questions when he saw me using tools, asking that he wanted to use them as well. And I realized that the tools that I used were just not organized at all because they were all in my head. And they were really unusable for him. So I went through a lot of work categorizing them, putting them together in a way that was easily accessible, but brought up by a single keystroke in a pop-up menu. And I saw that that worked fine for him. And then I was struck by the realization that what I had done was what I had done for him would work best for others. I'm the guy who was best able to have an overview of all of Thor's tools. And it took me a lot of time. I say a lot of time with multiple iterations to arrive at the final product, which is the quick access menu. And I realized that most normal devs, I would say that they were not going to use most of these tools unless somebody gave them a quick, simple, easy way to access and understand them. And once I got that concept, I thought, okay, fine. I can go through the work to do this because, first of all, I told you that this is my obsession. And that said, it's fun to talk about it. And this is the stuff that I really like. So what has been missing? What has been missing from Thor and during previous presentations? Well, my feeling has been that it's sort of like you were presented with a large box of Lego bricks. And you said, there's lots of neat stuff you can do with this. But you weren't given any directions. You weren't given any pictures. And you didn't know whether you could build the submarine or the Taj Mahal with what you were given. All of the tools I've been talking about have been around for a long time, and there's plenty of documentation. What's been missing? You have the tools, you can assign hotkeys. Well, what's been missing is something that ties all the pieces together. A simple thing that you can go to and use immediately that puts it all together for you. Something that you can use now. My goal is that this quick access menu is something, when you are done with this, if this was the last session of the day, you could use it immediately in any work that you happen to be doing. So this is accomplished by using what we need is something that says, here's the list of all the tools that will simplify your work. Okay. All of them immediately accessible in one menu, available with a single hotkey. And I haven't mentioned this yet, all of them with documentation and configuration information, easily accessible as well. So this is handled through what I've mentioned now is the quick access menu. And we're going to install the quick access menu, and I'm going to encourage you, if possible, to install it yourself right now during the session as I install it. It's really quite easy. And then what you will see is that you can actually start using parts of it during the session. So what installing this menu does first is it creates a new menu pad called Quick Access Menu. Okay, that's the first thing it does. The second thing, it creates also a pop-up menu, same menu, but you can get to it through a hotkey, which means it's not in your system, in the system menu. And there are some cases in which some tools do not always work from the system menu pad, but if you try them from the hotkey, they will work there instead. And it will assign hotkeys to the most commonly used tools. Actually, it'll assign the hotkeys that I use. And you may shudder a little bit about this if you have assigned hotkeys, but you should know that's not an issue. First of all, if you have a hotkey that is already assigned, it won't use that one. And second of all, it won't reassign a hotkey if a tool already has one. And of course, just in case, all your tables that were modified have been backed up before this is done, so that if you really want to get rid of it, you can. Although if you do, it's sort of like, I'd like to hear from you, what about it didn't work for you? So let's go into FoxPro, and we're going to start off, and I'm encouraging you, if possible, to do this at the same time as I'm doing it. I'm going to go down to Launcher, and I'm open the launcher, Thor launcher, and I'm going to type in, for the filter, I'm going to type in the words Quick Access. And there's a tool here, Install Quick Access Menu, which I can click on. Comes up, and on the bottom, down here in the middle, it says Run Tool. You won't need to review the documentation because you're getting oral documentation right now. So we'll say no. Are you ready to install? Yes, and away it goes. And before you close this particular form, you'll notice I have a new something in the menu pad here. And there's also, it's accessible through this other key, Control K. Either way, 99% of the time they're equivalent. I happen to like the hotkey Control K because it pops up closer to where I'm working on the screen. So we're going to go to start now, going to the first of our tools. And you notice the size, it's kind of nice working in a huge font size because making these menus fit on the screen, you get some odd results. The first tool is Go to Definition. Now, Go to Definition started on the day when Matt called and said something like, I just learned that in Visual Studio, you can highlight a method, press a key, F12, and it will take you to its definition. We should do that, just like Visual Studio, only better. To be clear, when Matt used the word me, he meant, well, me. And as he often said, I can come up with the ideas, man. Anybody can write the code. So what I'm going to be showing you is what this particular anybody was able to do with Matt's suggestion. So the way Go to Definition works is what he said is you highlight in this case, a procedure, and I'm going to say Go to Definition, and it opens up the PRG that that I was referring to here. It finds the definition for you. Now, I want to notice something. Have you noticed something special here? Anytime I execute one of these tools from the quick access menu, I am making it appear up here so you know what tool I am currently talking about, and also the hotkey. And for you might not be able to read it, but in smaller font is telling me what the next tool is that I'm going to be talking about. Now, the first thing that we made work easier is we recognize that if you could double click on this and use Go to Definition, you could just as easily do single click and have the program automatically look in both directions to find out what the name is. So you can click anywhere in the name, or you can click before the first character or after the last character. It all works the same way. You can look for a procedure or a function in a PRG. Now, I'm not going to use the menu because that's a little bit slow. You can see that I'm using the hotkey F12 right here, and it goes to this procedure in a procedure file. It works with constants. I've got a constant here, and if I use Go to Definition on that constant, it finds that defined constant in the PRG I'm working with. But if we go back again and we do this, you can't quite see here. Notice that I have an include file. So if you go to definition on this particular constant, it opens the include file for you and shows you its definition and value. We're going to moving along here. We can go to this particular PRG. I'm going to go to this PRG again. Notice I have a return statement of some result. And what I might ask myself is, well, where does that come from? And I can use once again, the hotkey F12. And it will go back and it finds all the assignments moving backward through your code of the variables. It's kind of amazing. This wasn't, I didn't implement this till this year. And it's like, I can't imagine that it took me so long. It's one of the things I'm always interested in. Where did this variable come from? There are various places it can come from. It can come from an array function. You can come from select into array, a calculate, a store. And actually, okay, you can't quite see this over here, but it's at the end of a local statement. And one more, it can be in a parameter statement as well. So you can go backwards through your list and you can find all of the places where a variable was assigned. While I'm there, here's a place where I have a select from this is kind of simple little code, but it's a good example. I have a select from this cursor, and you may, if you have a lengthy code, you might say, where is that created? Well, it will find something into the cursor as well. We can go to a form, so it will find a form if you like this, or we can find a report. Each time here, I'm pressing go to definition. I'm just clicking in the name and using go to definition. Well, there we go. Now, there's some possibility in some of these cases of name conflicts. It's conceivable you could have the name of a form that be the same as the name of a class or a PRG or whatever. You can avoid that confusion by using the first keyword. This is a Foxborough keyword, so if I click on that keyword instead, it knows do form must be a form that it's opening, and report form must be an FRX that it's opening. Oops, wrong one. That wasn't a very good demo. Let's close that and do on report form. Now, sometimes you have explicit file names which include extra characters such as spaces and backslash. In that case, you can highlight the whole thing. I believe, but I'm not entirely sure, you don't need to highlight the quote marks. And you can do go to definition and it will open that. And similarly, and this is a long one, if you highlight as something which includes Excel files and any other files, it will open up this file in Excel for you. The next group of things that it works on is, let's see, let's go to this definition. It occurs to me right now, I'm going to show you another tool here. Just a little diversion because you should know that this is going on at the same time in the background. Every time that you'd use go to definition, it leaves a bookmark, if you will, or breadcrumbs, if you will, about both where it came from and where it went to. So if I'm in this, if I just got to this form here, this thing, and suppose that this other guy was hidden so you couldn't see the one that it came from. If I use the second here, cycle bookmarks, it goes back to what it was that I used to get here. And it keeps all of these bookmarks. So you can keep doing this. It says Shift plus F12 will take me through, well, I only have two right now. It's a simple little case of those two. And there's a twin. Its twin is add or remove bookmark. This one isn't used as often, but you can use these two in combination without using go to definition. So if you're somewhere in a PRG and you're not going to use go to definition, you say, oh, I'm going to come back here, add a bookmark, go someplace else and add another bookmark. And then you can go back to them using Shift F12. Now, the thing about this is the bookmark disappears when the window closes. It can't reopen the window that you are working on. So let's go back to, well, let's see here. I'm going to go back to where I was. And we have some various objects that we can create. And there are multiple different ways that you can get to the definitions of these objects. You can click on the word local here, for instance, and use the hotkey, and it will go directly to that object. And that works the same whether it's local or private or public. They're all the same structure, just different keywords. For these here, you can, when you actually have new object or create object, you can click on the keyword for new object or create object, and it will open it for you. Even a little bit more interesting is down here when you can click on this thing, which is defined above there are two different ways it's defined here in the local statement and also in the new object statement. But if I click on that, I can also go to it directly from there. Let's close that thing right there. And finally, you can click on a method. You can go to the definition on the method that is attached to this object. So having seen that you can go to a method, I can go directly this new object, LO sample. I can go to this method directly in that sample by using the hotkey. And I'm going through all these examples to show you, first of all, it's really easy. Click on something and try go to definition. But I want to show you the full extent of things that it can do. So if PEM editor were open, now some of these that are within forms and classes, or you can work better if PEM editor is open. So this one, if PEM editor, well, I'll open it. If I click on this and say, now the key is F12, go to definition, it navigates in PEM editor to that thing, to that particular property. Here's a case when you can, if you use go to definition on this thing and it's a new property, you get a form to add a new property. Now, the thing about this is so convenient for me. It's very rare that I use any other method to add properties or methods. I will typically use it in code. I reference in code, and then when I reference it, I will say go to definition, and it will create the property or method for me. I can go to a method on the form. Let's close this guy. I really didn't want to do that. Yeah, actually, that's not the way I wanted to do it. I wanted to go back here, didn't I? Because it'll open what I wanted to have open. You can go to a particular definition. You can also go to a method that doesn't have any code. And if it doesn't have any code, it shows you all of the inherited code. And it tells you what class the inherited code comes from. This particular example, there's only one layer that has code, but it would show you all the layers of code as well. So it's sort of like view parent code, but with giving you a little bit more. And there I did it again. Oh, here we go. So you can do this. This is the same thing as some new property. I mean, you only make the decision about which one it is within the form. You can actually do this with parameters if you want, and it will create a method for you with those parameters. You can go to an object on the form. Went to it found print tag. This is only with PEM editor open, and it can go to the click object in that. And finally, it can do this sort of fun here where it knows about embedded widths and all that type of stuff. And it does, I don't have time to show you this, how far it can go with embedded widths. But I can go here and say, I'm interested in that. And it actually found, here's the entire path to this object, and it focused on the visible property. And it works the same way this way, or whether it's within with statements. It doesn't make any difference. So let's close this and new. Now we're going to do something called, now everything I've shown you thus far about go to definition is summarized very easily. When in doubt, click on it, say go to definition, and if it can, go to definition will find it for you. And you'll be amazed at how many different places it is able to find. However, there is something more that you would not expect, and this is using the alias dictionary. And I'll show you what the alias dictionary looks like in a minute, but first I'll show you how it is used. I have a global object in this application called GeoKTrack. It doesn't exist when I'm in the IDE, only in production. And yet, using the alias dictionary, I can go to open up that that class, just like that. Oh, and beyond that, of course, if I can open up the class, I can go. You know, it's not. Sorry, folks. Had to close this. I can go here. I couldn't do it with. There we go. That can go to a particular method. Now, two more that are really the same example. This is ONAV SQL, and this is ONAV SQL in used in two different ways. In one case, I have this particular use would be if I have it local in a procedure, and this is where I would have that something that's hanging off a form or a class. But in both cases, they work the same way. I can say this, and this will actually go. You'll notice that it finds this class in a PRG, and I can similarly go to a method there. And this second statement looks the same way. I can do this, and there it goes to the same place, or I can go to the method. So let me show you what the alias dictionary looks like. If I can find my way through these menus. Browse the alias dictionary. And now this is the first use that I will show you today of the using tourist tool of SuperBrowse. And I'm not going to, he's going to be talking about that in his session tomorrow afternoon. And I'm going to show you a few features that are appropriate that Thor takes advantage of. So basically, this is the whole table, and you're browsing the table. Here's the structure of the table. And one of the features of this table is that if you double click on a row, come on, if you double click on a row, you can edit that row. I'm not going to be editing it, but it's an easy way to see what's going on. It's easier to read the fields in the memo in a table rather than when they're vertical, having them horizontal. Here's the name of the alias that I've used, and here's the definition of how that determines a class. And the structure here is if you have something between curly braces, you have two parts. The first part is the name of the class. The second part is the name of the file it is, whether it's a VCX or a PRG. So basically, when you say go to definition on GeoKTrack, it finds it in this table. It gets this definition, says, oh, I know what that is. That defines a class, an object, and I can use that definition of an object that tells me where it is. Now, I talked about ONAV SQL. This one is different because it has a star in it. And the star means, well, what you'd expect means anything. Anything that ends in ONAV SQL will refer to this class. And that's why LO, let's see if I can show you here. I can't because of the, this is modal form. And there are other uses. For instance, some people I've seen use an OAP object on which they hang other objects. And this is a case where there are two stars. And so there's the first star here says OAP. If you had, say, vendor, OAP.o vendor, this would look in table for the vendor, and substitute the vendor word from there into this, and you could open that class. Now, if I was being presented with this, I'd say, well, that's great, but I'm not going to remember that from this presentation. Until we got to aliases, I got you. And you're right. I'm going to show you one more thing here, though, before I show you why that will not be an issue. And that is within code, you can have a definition that applies just to this procedure, in which with this structure, # star # alias, you can say this.something.o object is this class, and you can't quite see. Ooh, too far. It's the same structure with the curly braces. So I can do here, even though there is nothing called O something, and there's nothing called O object, I can go to that. I use the hotkey, and I can go directly to that object. So you can define in cases where you don't get IntelliSense, you have an unusual object. If you said LO grid is something, you could define this alias statement to make go to definition work. So what's been missing is, how do you know how to use it after I'm done? Right now, you have some idea, but when I'm done with the session, you won't be able to. So if you go, I'm going to go to this right here, back where we were on the menu, browse alias dictionary. Well, what I'd like to do and wanted to do is to give a right-click menu, context menu. And of course, if I right-click right now, nothing happens. Right-click does nothing in a menu. And so I had to find an alternative that would give me a menu in a way that people could remember. Now, first of all, if you look at this menu, you'll know that there are three different ways, at least three different ways you can choose items from that. You can click on it. I can click on go to definition, or I can move the cursor up and down and press enter, or I can use the access key. And as I'm looking at this, I can see that I have two different tools. I have two different tools, go fish and go to definition, having the same access key. Well, that's unfortunate, but you can fix that. So what I was able to learn is that I can determine whether the shift key is pressed for each of those three ways of selecting from the menu. So if I go down here to browse alias dictionary, I can hold down the shift key and do it any one of those three ways. I could click on it, press enter, or if it had an access key, I could do that. And I'm going to do that right now and press shift, enter, and I get well, it's kind of hidden because you have to know how to do it differently. A context menu for this item. Right now, it doesn't tell you which item. I didn't know how to do that. So the first item is help. I'm not going to follow that help because it's going to take me someplace else that I don't want to go. It will find the web page in GitHub that describes what the alias dictionary is and tells you what all the options are and how you can use them. And one of the things that I did for this quick access menu is every tool that's in the menu, I made sure that the documentation, it pointed to the correct documentation. And incidentally, I have to say that the first reason I did this was not to be nice to you guys so that you would have documentation. That's where I ended up with. Where I started was, if I was going to be describing all of these tools in this session, and I did not want to produce documentation for that. There'd be hundreds of pages to document all of this, and all these tools have documentation. So I found a way to avoid having all of this documented in the white paper, which you'll notice is quite brief. So that's the help. The next thing is bug reports and suggestions. So this is, it goes to GitHub to the issues page for this item. It'd be pretty easy if you're using tools otherwise not to know how to get to the right place. This takes you directly to the right place for reporting bugs and suggestions and issues. And I'm probably not supposed to say this, but at the end of the session, you said, we really want your evaluations on the session. That's true. We all do. But for me, what I'm more interested in from you is that you use the issues pages to make comments. This works, this doesn't work. Tell me about suggestions. You have to understand that most of the time, the guy who's going to respond to many of these things is me, and I want to hear from you. I'm going to leave this particular one. I'm going to find a menu that I like, a pop-up that I like better. This one, and I'm going to do Shift-click this time. There are a few more options here that I wanted to make sure you are aware of. One is this options guy. Many tools have options in the Thor configuration screen. Kind of hard to go from a tool to find where it is in the Thor configuration screen. This takes you there. Okay, so Beautify X has a whole bunch of options, which we'll discuss a little bit of tomorrow. But it takes you directly to that page, and they take instant effect. There are also plugins. I'm going to assume everybody knows what plugins are. The plugins for in Thor, you get the actual code. You get the real code that's working now, and you can modify it in your own My Tools folder. It's transparent to you where it's going. It will all work, and you can modify things as you want. There aren't many places where I would guess that people will make modifications, but certainly there are people who have asked for the ability to have plugins. You can reassign a hotkey. So go to definition. I'm sorry. Well, this is F6 was what was used for Beautify. I forgot I was talking about Beautify X. That was the original value for Beautify X. You can reassign it or you can get rid of it. You can mark something as a favorite. I'm going to come back. I'm going to do that last because I'm going to show you where the favorites end up. You can mark something as startup, which means when Thor runs, this tool will run. The only tool that I use is IntelliSense X. Some people use it for PEM Editor as well. And you can put it in the toolbar. Actually, I have some things in the toolbar because I was asked to do it, and I learned how to do it. So some of my tools are accessible there rather than in other places. And last of all, you can go to the published code. So I said this thing about favorite. The thing about favorites is, if you look here, you'll notice that there are a couple of items, go to definition and go fish, that are bold. I have marked them as favorites. And by marking them as favorites, the whole idea behind favorites in this context is that they will show up as bold here. So it will draw your eye to them. For this presentation, both today and tomorrow, I suggest that if you have access to this, have installed the quick access menu, that you then can mark the tools that you are interested in, you want to use, or you think you'll want to use and research more, so that when you come back to this after the conference, you'll start with something, you'll have immediate notes on what it was that you found interesting here. So for instance, if I won't mark something as favorite. We're not going to change that. Now, continuing on through, we've gone through 3 tools already. Certainly, eventually, the pace will have to pick up. Next, we're going to go to Go Fish. And I'm bringing up Go Fish. I'm going to assume that everybody here knows and uses Go Fish. So I'm not going to explain how to use it. It's pretty easy. Choose a scope and then look for something. I am going to point out some special features about Go Fish that might make it a little bit nicer for you. First of all, it's the position of this code view window, and the code view window by default is underneath. And for me, I found that when I have my form for a Go fish is very wide, and it seemed like a waste of space to me to have all this white space on the bottom, when actually when I'm looking at code, what I'm interested in, I can see a lot more of it this way. I want to see a lot more of it than what I can actually see on the bottom. So this is just a perspective. This doesn't work very well actually when you're on a small form. So I'm going to put this back below where it sort of belongs. There's some grippers here that let you move it. You can now, over time, there have been some questions about the relationship of all of these controls up on top. And the thing that is the clearest explanation is everything above the line here, above this line, these are all controls that relate to the search the next time you click on Go Fish. So you can do all of these options then, and these below here apply to after the search. I'll point a couple of obscure little things under the advanced. If you right click under advanced, there are a couple of check boxes on the bottom. I suggest that you click those and you'll get rid of some of the chaff that may appear. There's an options thing here which you can visit. And under the column selection, you can select which columns you want to will want to see. And a newer addition, it's new this year, is you can assign the grid coloring that you want, the color of the lines of the grid. And apparently it does not want to stay below when I do that. So, and below here, you have a number of different things. Most important, I think, is the filter. And the filter lets you filter on basically all the columns. There's way more options that you need. And I'm only going to talk about one, and that is within the same statement. Because Go Fish only searches for text in a single line. So if you use wildcard, if you wanted to look for, suppose I had a table named favorite, and I said select star favorite, that would only find lines that had select followed by the word statement at some time. But if I was actually looking for longer select statements, that wouldn't work. So what you can do is you can put the less frequently occurring word in your search phrase, which would be the name of the table in my case, and then I could type in select here. And when I applied that, it would look through for every match where favorite was found, it would look to see if select is in the same statement as well. The problem of doing an initial search that searches through statements, that's a problem that has not been solved yet. I'm not convinced it ever will be. And you can also hear something to be noted. You can limit the filter just to code. Okay, that's much shorter. And you can also, if you want to, you can export this grid to a number of different places, DBF or Excel or whatever. So let's get rid of this. Let's go back to here. And there's one little thing that happens when you have a menu. Okay, I'm looking at just MNXs here. And this particular line, there's some code in a menu. And quite honestly, we don't know where it is. It's something in a menu. And what this allows us to do, this is a new little icon that you probably can't read it, but it's right next to open folder. And this little icon shows you the layout of the menu. So this tells me that I know that the thing that it highlighted was favorites. It's in that thing under the help main menu. It's a handy way of finding things in MNX. So you may have noticed that I'm in version 5, And you may say, Jim, why are you in version 5 when version 6 has been released? And I'll tell you that I really wanted to demo some parts of version 6, but I had lots of problems with it. And maybe it's only me, I don't know, but I had lots of problems installing version 6. And then when it finally got installed, there were a few bugs. And then the most recent version, which I had a week and a half ago, it gave me a bug right away. And I just decided I can't handle that. I need to use a stable version of Go Fish. And like I said, maybe if you've gone to version 6, that works for you, good. I'm glad it does. I can tell you a little bit about version 6 because there are some hints here in on this options page. And if we go, this is a well-hidden option, and this is a case where there was an option that was released in this version from back in version 5, looking forward to the future, and it put in an option before it had any effect. And this has to do with what you would get if you're in version 6. The main thing about version 6 is to make it work like code references. And I want to explain that that doesn't mean that it uses the code references searching, because the search engine is untouched. What it does is it changes the way the UI works. So this may appeal to you if you still want some of the code references functionality. And there are 3 things that I can point to, even though I can't demonstrate them. First is that you can, if you choose, the folder that is used for settings for Go Fish is normally in your Home 7 folder, the subfolder there. And this says, no, I don't want to do that. I want it as a subfolder of my, whatever my current resource file is, which would make sense for people who have multiple resource files. Turns out it doesn't apply to me, but you may want them different. And particularly if you want to have Go Fish work differently, some settings different by different resource file. The second thing it does, and we're going to close this. The second thing it does is when you go to history, and here's the history of all my searches, or my recent searches anyway. I don't keep very many of them very long. This is a summary of all your searches. And by choice, one of the options in version 6 is you can say, I want to see only the searches which match this scope. Whatever my scope is, I want to match that scope. So this I'd find this one and a few after that. So it filters that a little bit. And then the third thing that I'm aware of, and there may be more UI changes that I'm not aware of, is that right now, this tree view shows all the results for the current search, the most recent search, and you'd have to go to history to get the prior searches. You can select that you want the tree view to show all searches from from the current scope, whatever that scope is. And this is very much like code references. So you would see every time you did another search in this project, you would get another main node here, and you get one for each search and they'd be closed. Those nodes be closed, but you could expand them if you wanted to. And the most recent search would be at the bottom, and it would show you all this as well. So this is a way that you can go back, you can see all the previous searches, and you could go back to those searches without going to the history button. I think my understanding that those are the major things that differences of going to version 6. So let's close some of this stuff. And I'm going to go on to the next tool I'm going to talk about is called Finder. And Finder, if this top area looks something like, let's make it not quite so wide. If it looks to you something like what you see from Go Fish, that is specifically because it's an offshoot from Go Fish. And instead of searching code, it searched for names. That's what Finder does. It finds names. So you can, for instance, you could look for a file search. Now you may think, well, I can do a file search by using Explorer of some kind. Well, one difference is that this works in a current project, which is kind of hard unless your project is entirely self-contained in a single folder. And if I type, for instance, target, which is the name of a customer and also a report, we can go and we can look at these. Let's expand this a little bit. And this gives the last time and date of the modified. And then you can open it if you want. You can run it, etc. So that's for file search. More interesting is class search. If I was going to search by tag, I might say, well, how about classes that have the word text as part of the class? And this is looking just in this project. I got a list of them. I'm not sure what the order is here. I'm really not sure what the order is. But of course you can sort on the columns if you want. And then once you've done this, you have a bunch of options that you can do. For one thing, if you want to find classes this way than other ways, you can search by the name and you can drag this and drop it on anything else that you're editing, a form or a class. You also have a nice right clicks menu that gives you quite a few options. Opening, you can go to the class browser. You can use Hex.js. You can create a subclass, easy enough. You can create a duplicate class. That's a little bit harder, easier to do here than it is in the class browser. Here's an interesting one. You can get a list of descendant classes. If we get the descendant classes for this particular class, you'll see all classes in whatever VCX they're found that are in this project where this is the parent class. And then, of course, you've got a context menu for all of them. And one more option that we have here is sibling classes. No, where used, I'm sorry, we can go to where used. And this will show us, you can do this in Go Fish. Go Fish will certainly find all the places, but it's a lot harder, it's a lot easier to see them here, particularly since this is a fairly long list, than what you would get in Go Fish, because you would find you can't look just for a class in Go Fish. So this is one of those tools which I think has been pretty much ignored, but I use it occasionally, and when I do, I find it to be quite valuable. And finally, in this list, we have find objects. And find objects is something that here it has opened a form for us on a particular, you can see here that it's opened on a particular method, but that's not terribly relevant. This lets you search through all controls that are on a form to find which controls match some search expression. That's what you're trying to do. I'm sure you can't read the small text, but you can bring it up on your own. And because of the way it's written, there are two things that you should know. First of all, you can say dot caption. It's going to search through each object, so dot caption refers to the current object. And you can just say dot, and it use the caption for the current object. You don't have to check to see whether it exists. It will ignore, there won't be a match if it doesn't exist. And the second thing is that it returns a match if the result, it's not a true false, it's an empty, not empty match. So in this case, if I say click for a caption in this form, okay, this shows that here's the names of the object and here's the caption, and let's get rid of, I can't do that. Let's repeat that. Yeah. Well, this isn't good. There we go. That's where I want it to be. So let's actually do that search over again. Hello. Well, apparently this one wants to misbehave right now. That grid that I showed you, you can actually edit any of, you can double click on any entry in there and you can edit from there. So if you're going to change a bunch of captions, you could look for non-empty captions and you can edit it there rather than going through any other method that has to, you have to find them one at a time. So finally, we are, I'm going to close a bunch of things here. And we're going to move on to, we have already finished one of the 8 categories. And we're going to go now to another, we're going to skip these because I don't think there's time to do them today. We're going to go down to the drop-downs list. And the drop-downs list, there's a whole bunch of these, but the source of this is IntelliSense X. And IntelliSense X, like a lot of these projects, started with a call from Matt. The call went something like this. He said, Jim, got this great idea. When you're in the command window and you type in m dot, you get a list of global variables, right? Go, yeah. And he says, if you got an open table called pal, I have one. You probably can't read it down here. I've got an open table. So I say pal dot, that opens up and I get the list of fields. Yeah, okay, not exciting. And he said, if you got a global, a variable, yeah, I can get the list of stuff on. He said, but the thing is that none of these work when you are in a method code. They don't work. I said, I know. He says, so let me introduce you to something called isx.prg, written by Christoph with contributions from a number of other people in the early 2000s, which does exactly that. Let's take Christoph's tool and see what we can do with it. And I said, well, it's one thing to do better than Visual Studio. It's a higher hill to climb to improve on Christoph. But let's see what we can do. So I'm going to go to this menu here. And the first thing I'm going to say is, oops, too far. It doesn't help when it overlays everything. I'm going to execute this. But first, I'm going to say that, unfortunately, the defaults for IntelliSense X were not chosen wisely. And it's impossible to reverse, for me to reset the defaults. So if you are going to use IntelliSense X by dot, and I really am talking to you about this because I think that you will find it to be valuable, the first thing that you would do is you would execute this to set the recommended defaults. And it just says, do you want to do it? And you say yes, and it's transparent to you that it's happened, and you'll never do it again. So IntelliSense X by dot is a toggle, as it says. It toggles between, if you turn it on, IntelliSense X works. If you toggle it again, then you're back to native IntelliSense. You can tell the difference by how the drop-downs work. So I'm going to turn it on here. I'm going to press enter. It brought me to some code here. And now when I type in, I'm going to go up here, it might be more visible. If I type in what Matt told me to try, m dot, I get the list of local variables, and they look a little bit nicer. The font size is a little bit bigger. My eyes aren't as good as I like to be, so I like to use a slightly bigger font. He said you do pal dot. That's the name of the table. I do that, and I get the list of fields. Now, this is a different list than you get from normal IntelliSense because it gives you the list of all the fields in their normal order. It uses something called a custom keyword list, which I'll mention tomorrow in relation to Beautify X. so that names are alphabetized, capitalized correctly. It also gives you the structure. Okay, so you can see the full structure of the table as well. That global variable that I had, I can say go vars dot, and it gives me the list of all the properties and methods, and as well as for properties, it gives me their values, which can be quite helpful. And I'm going to show you one more thing, which is this dot, right? And this, once again, it's the name of it. It gives you the list of properties and methods and values. And if there are methods, it gives you, if possible, the list of parameters. So first of all, you can see that the UI looks different. You can see that the UI gives you different lists, different data in the additional columns, depending upon which type of object you've got. This is also a passive tool. Once it is started, I'm going to go up here. If I go down to this menu, you notice it's marked as startup. Once I've marked it as startup, it executed. I don't ever have to touch it or think about it again. It just like it comes up like normal IntelliSense. When you press a dot, you get something different. What is different, something else besides the fact that the drop down looks different, is this: that you can begin. It will filter the list as you type. That's the first part. And second of all, it matches anywhere. The text that you enter is matched anywhere, not just at the beginning. So for instance, if I knew that there was a thing reference the mouse, I can see that there are a number of methods which have mouse in them, and there are a couple of others that don't. There's a method called align to mouse, and then there's also a property, mouse end shift. So this is a very important difference. As you type, the list shrinks. I can get that far to mouse down. That's not as very interesting if I did this. And I can use, none of those begin with form, but I could choose one of them just like this. Now the thing is that this works everywhere. Boy, that's a strong statement. The intent is that this works everywhere that normal IntelliSense works. So everywhere that you can normally get a dot, use a dot to get a drop-down list, they will all work the same. Now, I'm not going to go and show you all of those because it will just work. It should work the same. It would bother you if you didn't get a list. It also works in places where go to definition could find a form. So you may recall, this is really jumping ahead here. Let's see if I can. No, not there. You may recall that I had something called go ktrack, which was something in the alias dictionary. If go to definition can go to the object, this is where there's a very deep tie between go to definition and IntelliSense X. If go to definition go there, then IntelliSense X can also give you the drop-down list. So that has greatly expanded all the places. There are certainly places that go to definition can find an object where normal IntelliSense will not find the object. So with that in mind, what you'll find now is if you've turned this on, there are just going to be a lot of places where without you thinking about it, pressing a dot is going to give you the drop-down list that you want. That's exactly what you would hope for. Go to definition is almost the easiest tool to use because you just click on something and say go to definition and it finds it for you. Whereas this one is easier than that. You don't have to think about it at all. All you got to do is use a dot. There are some places beyond the normal use of dots, where you would, let's do this. Go to definition. Here's some crummy little select statements. Here, you could say pal dot if you wanted to, and it would give you the list. But also, it's smarter than that. It knows that these are fields. I can say select dot. If you're in a select statement, it will know where what table you're referring to by analyzing the entire select statement, and it will give you the fields that are in that select. So you can select any of these fields. It's the same UI. The UI always works the same for all of these places. The second thing to notice here is that sometimes you have an alias, a local alias for a table. Well, you wouldn't do it for PAL because it's short, but you might do it for maintenance table items as MTI. And here you can say P dot, and it will recognize the local alias as well. And it even works here. Both of those things work here even when there are join statements. It recognizes it across join statements. So if I say a dot right here, it will show you all of those. In fact, if I type in ID, it shows you the fields that contain the ID as part of the name in either one of the tables that are being referenced. Now, I want to talk very briefly here about, if we go here, go to drop down, oops, wrong one. You know, actually, there's one more thing I do want to show you besides that, before I go to and that this is the one I showed you. I'm going to go to this one. And that is an example where, this is an example where I don't have a local statement, but you know that I can use a go-to definition because I told you that for this year. However, this one is a little bit different. Yep, you can get a buffer overrun error. Oh, joy. You know, this seems like a good time to end my session. Let me just say a few things before I close this, because clearly this has killed my session here. The first thing is that we installed the quick access menu, and that menu, it has all of the tools that we're going to be talking about. If you haven't installed it already during this session, I really encourage you to install it before the next session. Have it available, because I think that you will want to be able to mark which tools during the session, which tools are your favorites. And it's easiest to do that actually while you're hearing me blab on about them. The second thing is we created the new pop-up menu, the hidden context menu, and that's how you can go to the help. You can mark as favorites. There's all those other things I pointed out to you. Now, so far I've pointed out really 3 primary tools. Go to definition, which is pretty easy to use. Click and go. Second one was Go Fish, which I think you know. And the last one was IntelliSense X, which I suggest you turn it on and it works. Oh, except for that little buffer overrun. So let me say this. Tune in again tomorrow, same time, same place, and we'll see if our hero can explain to you why that really is not an issue that you have to worry about. See if he can explain his way out. And that is the end of this morning's session.